Hello and welcome to Criminal Justice Inspection Unpacked, the podcast of Criminal Justice Inspection Northern Ireland. I'm Melanie McVeigh, your host for this episode, and whether you're joining for the first time or you're a regular listener, it's great to have you with us. Today, we're looking at the use of Community Resolution Notices, or CRNs for short, and out-of-court disposals that can be used to deal with low-level criminal offences. And I'm pleased to welcome 4 guests who each have an in-depth knowledge in this area. They are Chief Superintendent Gary MacDonald and Inspector Julie Mark from the Justice Department of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, Laura Mallon from the Department of Justice's Justice Performance Team, and CJI's Roisin Devlin, who has led the inspection of the police service's use of CRNs, which was published in October 2025 and is available from the CJI website. So let's jump straight in. Roisin, I'm going to sort of turn to you first of all. Perhaps you can explain for the listeners what are CRNs and why it was important for this inspection to be carried out.
CRNs are community resolution notices. They are an informal disposal for certain offences, certain listed offences. CJI had looked at the police use of discretion in the past. So in 2015, we had an inspection that looked at discretionary disposals as they then were. And we had a follow-up review in 2021 of that inspection. It found that the operational guidance had been tightened up. CRNs had come to replace discretionary disposals. And there were also proposals to expand the range of offences that would come within the remit of community resolution notices. So we thought it was timely to look at this again and see how it was working in practice.
And maybe you could, between you, I'll sort of leave this one open to the wider guest group, but perhaps you could explain for us what types of crime can the CRNs be used for? Roisin, you mentioned that it's specific offences. It's not just a catch-all for everybody. Is that right?
That's right. So it's intended to be what might be termed as lower level offences, and they're set out in the operational guidance. So there are property related offences in there, drugs related offences related to possession, and some violence against the person offences.
Okay. What about what age can you receive a CRN from? Is it something that comes in when you have to be an adult, or can it apply to under 18s, or is there anything around that?
The age of criminal responsibility here is 10 years of age, and children and young people are eligible for community resolution notices, again, provided the criteria are met and there are certain additional safeguards there. So yeah, from the age of 10.
Okay. And you've mentioned there, and I'm going to sort of turn to my colleagues here from the police that have joined us and say, how useful have CRNs been for you as one of the tools for dealing with crime in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think they're a very useful tool for policing for a number of reasons. I think Roisin has touched upon the range of offences and the fact that it is for the lower level offences, and there's very set criteria before a community resolution notice can be used in Northern Ireland. But I think if we look at it from the perspective of it's a very swift way of dealing with a particular investigation. So the victim is getting that outcome. Of course, as an organisation, we're victim focused and we're victim led around investigations and how we deal with crimes. So we'll take the views of victims on board as we deal with crimes. But rather than a case which traditionally may have gone through the whole process and gone to court to potentially end up with a very similar outcome, we get an outcome much quicker for the victim. Likewise for the offender as well. We talk about, celerity of justice and the certainty of justice as well as being key kind of components in deterrence and reducing repeat offending. That's ultimately a resolution much earlier on for the offender as well. So we like to see that there's a reduction in repeat offending as well for this. And then just in terms of broader confidence in policing, broader confidence in the criminal justice perspective, system, there is just a more proportionate way of dealing with these types of offences. And also that does...
Sorry to interrupt, but it's not about trying to keep cases out of court, or is it about trying to ensure that it's the right type of offences that are going towards the court?
So it's all of those things. So I talked about satisfaction for the victim and a much more timely outcome for the victim. Likewise for the offender as well. But for the broader system, it allows those lower level offences to be dealt with in that proportionate way, to allow the broader criminal justice system to focus on the higher end and to try and speed up justice. So that is a kind of natural consequence of this work. It's not necessarily the main driver for the work, but it's a natural consequence of it. And I think that is an ethical, benefit of the likes of these, speedier resolutions. And there will be a broader benefit for communities and for victims as a result.
Well, we've spoken about lower level offences, but what does that mean in reality? What type of an offence could we be seeing a CRN applied for? Julie, would you maybe like to pick that up?
Yeah, so we have a very strict list of offences, and this was compiled based on what we were using discretionary disposals for, what we were noticing, trends and patterns of offending coming through, and what was going to court, and what seemed to be a bit disproportionate. So some of the offences that we would use would maybe be for common assault, very low level common assault, minor injuries, maybe disorderly behaviours, our possession. Roisin mentioned our possession offences. What we did notice and why we expanded to the drugs so broadly was because when we spoke to our drugs experts, they told us we're completely out of sync of what is being used in the wider community in Northern Ireland. And they provided me with loads of information about what is currently in use and what would be the regular levels of supply and what would be acceptable. And we did this in partnership with the PPS as well as other stakeholders in finding out what was suitable. And that's how we came to our quite extensive list. And it looks really broad, but it's broad for a reason, because every individual case could have what looks like quite a serious offence, but actually when you get down into it, the circumstances around it mean that a CRN is a very suitable disposal.
So it's very much about analysing and looking at the individual circumstances on every occasion. It's not just a whitewash, it's not just a broad brush approach, it's very much tailored. That's what I'm picking up from this, from yourselves.
It is very tailored. You have 6 approved resolutions as well to choose from when you're an officer, and you have a really strict 10-point sort of eligibility criteria that you must be able to show that they're meeting in order to get it, and you must admit the offence. In order to get a CRN, you must admit the offence.
So that's very important, that the person who's committed the offence has to say, yeah, I did that, I accept it.
Yeah, it's not a change. This does not stop a proper investigation from, being followed, and it doesn't discount the natural lines of inquiry that should be taken. This is whenever you have completed your investigation, this is the disposal option available to you should you meet the criteria. It is not a lesser option. It is a police disposal, but it is not to take away from the harm that's been caused, because we're using this. This sits on a police record and it can be disclosed. It sits on police record our niche for over a year with a flag.
So is it a case that an individual, someone who gets a CRN, do they have a criminal record or not?
No.
So again, that's something that you might be some confusion around in the community.
Yeah, it doesn't sit on on their criminal record, like our community record viewer. It doesn't sit there because it's not a court disposal. But it does sit on a police record, so it
can be disclosed in certain circumstances.
In certain circumstances, it can be shown, and it goes through our protective disclosure unit.
And I think the importance of the offence range, and Julia's touched upon it there, it is a very wide and varied range of offences that are there, but it is important that there are offences on this list that would also be prosecuted every single day of the week, where there's prosecution files going to the PPS for offences there. And I think that's the importance of the individual case and the individual circumstances. So the police officer can make their judgment, having conducted their lines of inquiry, having conducted the investigation and looking at all the circumstances relevant to the case, can essentially dip into a toolbox and go, what is the best and most effective disposal mechanism for this particular case, for this particular victim, for all the aggravating and mitigating factors around it. And they can make a decision, is this appropriate for community resolution notice, or do I need to arrest? Do I need to submit a file to the prosecution service recommending prosecution because the circumstances are just that is the most appropriate option? So I think that's the important thing here as well. It's about allowing officers to use that judgment within a framework, within a policy, within our policy guidance, to be able to make the most appropriate outcome for victims and offenders and for the wider community as well.
So it's not just a case of, depending on which officer comes to deal with your offence, how this may be progressed. There's a lot more safeguards and accountability in there. Would that be right?
Yes, that's
Checks and
right. So every community resolution notice would need to is subject to a supervisory review. There's certain circumstances in which those reviews require additional justification and rationale, and indeed then there are some that require an inspector's authorization as well. And then alongside that, so that will happen on the day, if you like, out on the ground. But then to support that, there's also the wider kind of governance frameworks and dip sampling in conjunction with the Public Prosecution Service as well, who come in and just look at the investigations, ensure that the lines of inquiry have been completed fully. This is not about doing a reduced investigation, checking decision making and just having a look at it and do they agree, do they not agree, and we take the learning from that as well. And obviously we'll maybe come on to some of the recommendations from the report later on, but there is sort of ongoing monitoring and review of that as well. So a whole range of kind of quality assurance mechanisms. It's not down to an individual officer in an individual location. There is the policy framework. They're subject to supervisory review and then kind of third-party independent review as well.
And I'll maybe come back towards yourself, Roisin and Laura, around that whole oversight and where this tool fits within the wider justice system. Because Laura, from your side, speeding up justice within the Department of Justice is a key priority, and this is one of the tools. How important are those out of court disposals to try and deliver that additional change?
I think they're extremely important. We are called Speeding Up Justice. That's the programme of work we're trying to take forward. But what we're very key to do is sort of highlight that we want to reduce avoidable delay. So I think people get concerned that we're just trying to make things go really, really quickly.
To be honest.
And to use any tools at hand to just make things move much quicker. And that's not the case. We want to remove avoidable delay. We want to make the system much more efficient. And I think where out-of-court disposals come in is they offer an extremely efficient approach to dealing with low-level offending that has, as Gary's already pointed out at the start of the conversation, benefits for victims, and not only that, but also the defendants themselves, and helping them to understand more immediately their actions. I think CRNs have a very low reoffending rate, which is a very positive step forward. So they're extremely important, that overall picture. In terms of the wider sort of Speeding Up Justice programme, out-of-court disposals in general form one of 5 work streams that we're currently working on. And what we hope that they will do is to try and reduce a lot of work going into the magistrates' court that just simply doesn't need to be there, and allow the courts to deal with the very serious offences that that should be going there and should be dealt with through that formal process. The wider use of out-of-court disposals, I think it is a very positive step forward, and where CRNs are just one of those. We've recently done a consultation around PNDs. Penalty notices is actually the correct term, but I think we all call them penalty notices for disorder. But and it included that and a few other things like prosecutorial fines and a variety of other things that we'd like to do in that out-of-court sphere. And that will be consultations now closed, but the results of that will be released in the coming months, really. And it was positive. I think what it highlighted for us, though, is there is a lot of confusion around offences and the wide variety of actual behaviours that lie within
some of those sort of overarching offences, like, for example, common assault has a very wide range of what that actually
The
covers.
question always is, what does that actually mean?
Yes.
Because if you're the victim of an assault, it's potentially a traumatic experience. You'll have had that offence committed, that crime has impacted you. So it is about trying to put some greater understanding around it.
I think so. And I think actually we were quite surprised when we did the consultation about some of the responses that we received and some of the conversations that we had around it, purely on that topic about sort of the offences and what they actually mean, and that sort of scale within it. So there's lots of good learning for us going forward, but they're an extremely important and useful tool.
I think Laura's point just to come in on that in terms of the public consultation was a really, really good opportunity for the public at large to engage with this work and to see the proposals just around the broader Speeding Up Justice programme. And I referred earlier on to the police officers toolkit. So the CRNs is not just the only option for that out of court disposals. We do have penalty notices for disorder and with other disposals that can take place in consultation with the PPS, such as informed warnings, restorative cautions. And we're looking at a whole range of issues and potential solutions, including, for example, really leaning into restorative justice space within Northern Ireland as well. And we all know the benefits of restorative justice in terms of, again, victim confidence, recidivism rates, and then the impact on the broader justice system. So I think that's it's a really good piece of work, that consultation. We're going to take forward I suppose the learning from that, the next steps through the out of court disposals working group, which we'll probably go on to shortly as well. And as I say, I think it's just important in terms as well, that broader work around speeding up justice. It's not just the out of courts space that we're looking to speed up the broader justice system in Northern Ireland. I don't think anyone in Northern Ireland from victims groups, members of the community, would say that actually we're doing a really good job in Northern Ireland in terms of the end-to-end processing time. So it's not just out of court disposals. It is looking at the remits of the court and where different offences go in terms of different courts. It is looking at committal reform. It is looking at digital transformation. There's a whole body of work ongoing in terms of trying to speed up justice, and this is a very important part of it.
And just on that point, what would you say to, what would any of you actually say to someone who sees a CRN as a soft option, or the equivalent maybe of a slap on the wrist for something that's actually, for the victim, has significant impact, or maybe if you're a shopkeeper or shop owner?
I'll maybe just come in very briefly and then I'll let Julie come in. But, we'll talk about even restorative justice. There's an element of restorative justice in this as well. If you've caused damage to somebody's property, going and making an apology and making good that damage there and then without having to go to court 6, 7, 8 months later to get a kind of a similar monetary fine. That's not the easy way out. I think all the learning you take from restorative justice practice as well, you'll find from academic study and everything else, the offender sitting down in front of their victim and acknowledging what they did wrong, apologising for it and putting it right is not the easy way out at all.
Yeah, I would say it's not the easy way out. Yes, there are difficulties with certain offences, like the possession of drug offences, because we don't have resources necessarily for everyone to attend a drug course. Mm-hmm. However, there's lots of work being done at the moment to widen that out. We have options of referring to Youth Justice Agency if you're under 18 for an offence awareness session, and we have options to make it more reparative so that you are repairing the harm and you're not just saying sorry. As a victim as well, like you must.
I think the victim's voice is very important in that. Yeah. That's something that came through in the inspection report as well. The importance of having that victim focus within the CRN process, and their voice is very much.
And they must be consulted. They must be considered. Now, if a victim chooses that they think this is the wrong option,
does that mean it doesn't happen?
No, it doesn't. They don't have the right to veto. If everything else is in line and meets the criteria and the investigating officer and the supervisor both feel that this is the right outcome, then that is possibly a better course of action. And not everyone will have the same rational view, and you have to accept that. Not every victim will want to go to court, just like not every victim will want to engage in a police investigation in any capacity. So you have multiple extremes of what a victim might want, and sometimes a victim doesn't know what is actually the best option, and maybe it isn't very well explained, but that's the officer who's issuing the CRN. That's their role, to ensure that the person is well informed so that it doesn't appear like it's just a soft option. We know that when children have to sit in youth conferencing, or whether they have to do an offence awareness session, and they have to acknowledge what they've done, you have to admit your offence to do this. There's quite a lot of work to do that. And everyone knows, if anyone understands restorative justice in any capacity, knows it's actually not easy. It's hard work.
Well, let me just put some of the numbers around that as well. We have almost 800 children who have gone through an offence awareness course and session as a result of kind of our work in this area. And likewise, we're really kind of leaning into drug awareness courses as well. So if you are caught with a small amount of drugs that fits the criteria, and you meet the eligibility criteria, and then being diverted off into a drug awareness course, and we're doing some really good work in Fermanagh and Omagh in this area at the minute. Surely that is a better outcome than going to court and getting another fine and then round we go again.
Again, that is one of the things that everybody needs: transparency and greater understanding around it. And I'll just come back to Roisin, because you made some there's recommendations within this report about how transparency and accountability can be put front and centre to try and improve public understanding about that. Maybe you'd explain a little bit more about the recommendations that we have here.
Yeah, well, public awareness was something that we had considered during the inspection. So it is interesting to hear that, having done the consultation, that there has been a lot of learning there, and which is really positive. The recommendations that we made were around improving that strategic oversight and understanding, really, of how CRNs are working. And we would see this across other inspections. It's about having some indicators and outcomes so that you can prove along the way that the initiatives are actually achieving the intended result. And one of those aims within there is improving victim satisfaction, and that is really important, to get a sense of how CRNs are working for victims, and also that bit about impact on offending. And Julie has given examples. We did see cases where that had worked well, and usually it was where there was something in place. So maybe there was an option for an awareness course around drug misuse, or in the case of children, they had been referred to Youth Justice Agency. So that was really important. So what we are really looking for is for that out-of-court disposals working group to bring more governance. So at the moment, it receives a lot of information around numbers of CRNs and how they are used. But if there was more monitoring around the impact and also how that can feed into the wider picture of speeding up justice, because, as the point has been made, it is part of a broader programme of work. I know we talk about lower level offences and that being what CRNs are for. We would have seen some offences, and we would describe it as high harm. And I think the conversation has been about due diligence and doing the checks and ensuring the safeguards are there. And supervisor rationale was really important in all of the cases. And we know that they are permitted in some domestic related offences and some hate related offences. So we had also asked that's evaluated to see if that is still the right approach, and that in the meantime there is another layer of oversight on that. So in relation to domestic abuse, public protection branch would be involved, and in relation to hate crime expertise within policing.
Well, maybe I could turn to Julianne Tagari and ask, the inspection recommendations that involved the police, they were all accepted. What's been happening since the fieldwork and the report was finalised? What has been taken to move things forward?
I suppose, I'd just like to start in terms of welcoming the report, and I thank Roisin for her work and the recommendations. And there's a whole range of work has already commenced. In fact, some of them have already been achieved, essentially, particularly in terms of the recommendation around the joint quality assurance with the Public Prosecution Service.
Yes,
so we've got
something that had dropped away.
Yes, and again, and I suppose it would be remiss of me as well. And I didn't want to necessarily put front and centre, but we all know the challenges around funding within policing. and particularly around, for example, the availability of these courses that cost money and who's going to pick that up, and obviously we're working with partners in health to try and kind of lean into that. But there's obviously funding challenges, and we still have obviously clear funding challenges within policing as well, which has potentially led to some of those issues. So it's a very, very small team. We've just bid for some additional transformation money with the DOJ through the speeding up justice work, which has allowed us to recruit additional resources into our out-of-court disposals team. We're already making progress around some of that reporting. So before, there wasn't a huge amount of data around this, to be honest, but now we have, at least we've stepped into that. We have that reporting data in terms of the numbers of CRNs that are being issued, whereabouts they're being issued, who is receiving them.
Because it is not just about collecting the data, it's then about what you choose to
challenges around that as well, because particularly in the space of where that sort of data is voluntary. And from the experience we get from our police officers on the ground, the minute you start asking people what their background they're from, they just don't provide that information, So there are challenges there, and we're working through that across a whole range of police powers and functions in terms of capturing that community background information to help us around the kind of the quality of use, for example. So we're taking forward the out-of-court disposals group as well. We'll have that data. We're pushing that information onto our performance database within policing as well, Pulse database, which will allow us to kind of drive those insights. We'll tighten up on the governance arrangements, and we already have sort of pushed out some of the local quality assurance to local districts as well, and we just need to make sure that's being done, as well as the additional kind of multi-agency quality assurance as well with the PPS. And yeah, plenty more work to do in terms of the rest of those recommendations, which we'll take through in partnership through the out-of-court disposals working group, which includes our partners with the DOJ and courts and everything else.
Because it was very much front and centre within the report that out-of-court disposal working group, there was a lot of positivity around it. There was a lot of willingness. There was, the structures were there for strong partnerships, but it's just trying to feel the way and how that can deliver best and deliver in terms of the outcomes. Laura?
The out-of-court disposals working group feeds directly into the Speeding Up Justice Programme Board.
So it's crucial for your work.
Crucial for my work. So the information that we've been getting on CRNs and other things are really important to help us evaluate how effective we're being, where we need to channel resources, or where we should be diverting resources from. As Gary pointed out, we have received some funding from the Public Sector Transformation Board to drive forward two of our work streams, one of which is out-of-court disposals and the other one is early engagement. And that has been a fantastic boost to the overall programme to really help us investigate some of these initiatives, new initiatives that we'd like to bring on board, all the stuff around restorative justice as well, to help us explore more and develop our disposals and range of disposals. So it's essential work going forward. But that funding comes with really the need for justification. So it's public money. We have to justify our spend, and I don't think that's a bad thing in any shape or form. But it has driven our agenda in terms of gathering information, making sure that the initiatives are properly evaluated, and that we have them.
And there's outcomes that address. The outcomes are there to back up the investment in terms of resourcing or in terms of public money.
Absolutely.
In terms of the 6-month evaluation around domestic and hate, so we already, engaged with our colleagues in public protection branch, and as recently as this week, we've had a discussion around the whole domestic abuse inclusion around.
You must have read my mind, because I was just about to ask you about that.
Saw your notes.
No, but it's great. It's encouraging and it's positive, I think, to hear that there is work going on in that space, and it is an area that was flagged for the PSNI to look at the appropriateness of what was going on around those particular offences, especially given the focus that is there around ending harm and violence against women and girls. I know I've mangled the phrase there, Laura.
I think it will take. We need to, of course, tread very carefully here in terms of domestic abuse. I think it's easy just to say, I don't think domestic abuse should be included in this. I think it's probably more nuanced.
There'll still be some people that would think that absolutely it should never be part of the government.
If that is the key, we can explore that again. We've obviously engaged with partners and our colleagues in public protection branch, where key in terms of key partners and stakeholders in terms of creating this guidance. And you can see that it's for a very limited subsection of offences. You can see all the criteria that's set down in terms of domestic abuse offences that are listed there, and also in terms of the enhanced scrutiny and oversight for that as well. And of course, there is a zero tolerance for domestic abuse and violence against women and girls. It's a key service strategic priority for the police service, and will not be doing anything to undermine that whatsoever.
And again, placing those victims and those who have those experiences front and centre in the decision making and the considerations that are taken forward.
Yeah.
Folks, I think with that, we'll bring to a close this episode of Criminal Justice Inspection Unpacked. And I thank you for all taking part in this vibrant and informed conversation on a topic that has potential to impact on any single one of us. Thank you, Gary, Laura, Julie and Roisin, for your insights and your time today. I hope you've enjoyed listening to our conversation and will join us for our next episode, where we'll be exploring the performance and challenges facing the Public Prosecution Service for Northern Ireland and how this can impact on the wider criminal justice system. Until next time, goodbye for now, and I look forward to joining you again soon.